I want to welcome everyone to our webinar today. I'm Miles Keogh, CEO of Spade Technology. We're going to go over why CEOs should care if their website is ADA compliant. And I have three people on the panel today that are professionals with quite a bit of experience in this field. We have Shep Davidson of Burns and Levinson. We have both Anthony and John Bonaspina. And I'm going to dive into it pretty quick because we had a lot of content to cover. So I'm going to start off. Shep, you've been talking to me about this topic for a bit. It's been probably a year and a half now. You've given me information about this going on, and I'm starting to see it in the marketplace now. So hoping you could kind of, share with us some of the experiences that your clients have had with this.
Sure. And I'm going to hopefully screen share here.
Perfect.
And so this is the first time I've done a screen share before, so hopefully everything works out okay. So thanks, Miles. Thanks to everybody for joining. There's nothing a litigator like me likes better than to have a group of people to whom he can pontificate. So I'm happy to do that for you guys today. So let's go, first to the, let's go to the Wayback Machine here. So 1990, George H.W. Bush signed the Americans with Disabilities Act. Essentially, the ADA prohibits discrimination based on handicap, disability. The original purpose of the law were for things like handicap ramps, so that people in wheelchairs don't have to try to navigate stairs. They have elevators, things like that. Now, the ADA only applies to people that own, lease, or operate places of public accommodation. So your house doesn't have to comply with the ADA, but a hotel lobby does, a bank does, an office building does, a supermarket does. They're all places of public accommodation. Now, starting in the late 90s, early 2000s, there started to be a couple of lawsuits against companies because they said their website wasn't ADA compliant. And these lawsuits were brought by people that were either blind or at least visually impaired. Because what they do is they'll have what they call screen reader technology, which is essentially software. So when their mouse rolls across some text on a website, it converts the text into audio. We'll basically read the text through the computer to them. The problem with that is that if you don't have special code embedded in your website, when it comes across this picture here, for instance, it doesn't know what to do. So a blind person doesn't know there's a picture of George Bush there. But if you embed certain code, the mouse rolls across it, the screen reader technology sees it, and then says, here's a picture of a man signing a document flanked by 4 people, 2 of whom are in wheelchairs. So the initial defense that companies brought when these lawsuits were brought against them was, well, my website isn't a place, so how can it be a place of public accommodation? Because again, the ADA only applies to places of public accommodation. And there were 2 different lines of cases that developed. The first was in the Ninth Circuit, which is California and the West Coast, and the other one was in the other one was in the East Coast in Boston in the First Circuit. And so the first big case was in 2006 in the Northern District of California and then the Ninth Circuit, and involved Target Corporation. And they were sued by the National Federation for the Blind. And the claim was that their website wasn't accessible to blind people, so it discriminated against them. Now, what the Ninth Circuit essentially said was, they said, hey, if you've got brick and mortar, like Target does in stores, and you got a website, well, then we're going to say that your website is a place of public accommodation. So that led off places like eBay, for instance. There's no brick and mortar eBay. You can't go to eBay. You can only access it through the web. So under this ruling, eBay and any place that was just virtual was safe. Now, the next case that was really significant was the First Circuit case against Netflix. And this was brought by the National Association of the Deaf. And so Netflix, their defense was, hey, look at that Target case, what the Ninth Circuit talks about. We're like eBay. We don't have a place. We're just out in the cybersphere. You can't come to Netflix. So therefore, we should be off the hook, First Circuit. And what the First Circuit did was they went back to the indicia in the Americans with Disability Act, where they talk about what it takes to make something a place of public accommodation. And some of those things are a place where you can have exhibition and entertainment, a place where sales are made, a place that's a rental establishment. Then they looked at Netflix and they said, check, check, check. You're a place of public accommodation. So in the First Circuit, in Massachusetts and some other jurisdictions, if you meet these criteria, it doesn't matter if you have brick and mortar. If you're sort of a public-facing, consumer business, your website's going to be a place of public accommodation. And we all know these days, if you've got a website and you're selling stuff, you're not just selling, out in California. You're trying to sell everywhere, so you could get sued here. So in 2010, the Department of Justice basically said, hey, we're looking at issuing some regulations so we can have a little clarity here as to what it takes for you to have your website compliance. And they didn't do it right away. It went on year after year after year. And then finally in 2017, they said, no, we're just kidding. We're not really going to issue any regulations.
What did they end up settling on? Like, what are the regulations today then?
So what happened was there was enter the World Wide Web Consortium. They go by WC3 and their WCAG standards. So what is WC3? Well, they describe themselves as an international community where member organizations, a full-time staff, and the public work together to develop web standards. And the standard they developed for accessibility for blind people on websites, for instance, is called WCAG. It's now up to WCAG 2.1. And essentially the courts, because there were nothing from the Department of Justice and no other regulations, the courts started looking to this. And essentially all the courts have adopted the standard, and the standard right now is WCAG 2.1 level AA. They have level single A, double A, and triple A, and the courts look at double A. Now, maybe the other guys in the webinar can tell you what that really means. I just know you have to get up to that level, and they can tell you on a more technical level what you have to do. That's the standard. Now, with these lawsuits, there's actually some, I call it good news. It's less bad news, which is the plaintiffs in these cases can't get damages. So they can get what we call injunctive relief. So they can get an order that your website be brought up to compliance with WCAG 2.1 AA. They don't get any damages, okay? But here's the bad news, all right? They can recover reasonable legal fees, and that can be really expensive. There was a case about 2 years ago down in Florida where Winn-Dixie Supermarkets, which is like the Stop and Shop of Florida, for those of you who have been there, they got sued saying their website wasn't compliant. It went all the way through to trial. They lost. They were ordered to bring their website up to level AA of WCAG 2.0 at the time. And they were also ordered to pay $100,000 in legal fees. And frankly, that's not that much for a case that's gone through trial. I was surprised it was that low. So it can add up to be a lot. Now, the really bad news is that there are some states that have developed their own statutes. California has something called the Unruh Act. And under California, the Unruh Act, which basically tracks the ADA, so the same sort of substantive liability standards, a plaintiff can get $4,000 per violation. And while I haven't been able to find any law on this, it would appear that that means every glitch on the website, everything that doesn't comply with WCAG 2.1 AA, $4,000 per violation on top of the legal fees. So if you're sued in California, it can be very, very expensive. Now, the tracking of these things, so I mentioned it started in the late 90s, early 2000s, and even by 2015, there were only about 60 lawsuits, but then it really ramped up. And 2018, 2019, we've got a ton of these lawsuits, and it really has not stopped. I mean, I don't know what it's tracking for 2020, but there are plenty of these lawsuits that are going.
Are those 200, over 2,000 different suits? I mean, are there that many large enterprises for them to go after?
So these big box, companies, they got hit a while ago, and they're fixing them. So they are going after the moms and pops of the world now. And one area is, hotels and motels. So this is literally a screenshot. I get every morning a listing of new court filings in the Federal District Court in Boston. And this is a portion of what I got apparently on September 29th. And you can see it's the same plaintiff over there on the left side. It's the same description, ADA defendant's website, and I can tell you it's the same lawyer as well. But look who they're going after, RF Daily Realty, LLC, the Wagon Wheel Motel. They've hit the big box retailers and they know how to handle it. And so they're going after these small entities, and they have these testers that go out and will just go to the website and see if it complies. And if it doesn't, they'll bring these lawsuits. So it's absolutely not just for big companies. Everybody that has any kind of consumer facing website needs to be concerned about this, because, you know, chances are you're going to get hit with this one way or the other. These lawsuits aren't going away. Domino's tried to appeal a case from the Ninth Circuit up to the Supreme Court last year, hoping that they could get the Supreme Court to say websites aren't places, so they can't be places of public accommodation. But they had no right to appeal. They had to apply for what we call certiorari, and the U.S. Supreme Court said they weren't going to take the case. So the way the law is right now, it's not going away. The next thing that sort of started coming down the pike is the same group of lawyers have filed a whole bunch of lawsuits against retail, saying that they discriminate against blind people because their gift cards, physical gift cards, don't have Braille on them. It doesn't look like those lawsuits are going to be successful, but it's just another variation on what these people are doing. So the big question I'm sure some of you are asking is, you know, what can you do to mitigate this? And there are sort of four things that you can do. You know, the first is you got to make sure that you comply with WCAG 2.1 AA. It really is just a matter of time before you're going to get hit with a lawsuit if you don't comply, unless you're just incredibly lucky. The second thing is you've got to periodically check your website and test it and make sure it remains compliant. If you have a strictly static website, which never changes, then you really don't have to do this. But if you add content to it, it could be a drop-down menu. And that requires apparently some kind of special code, or any kind of image, any kind of change in color scheme. You have to do that. If you have a dynamic website where things are changing a lot, you're putting new product up there, new services up there constantly, you really have to be vigilant about doing this.
Even things like blog posts and stuff like that?
Sure. If you have a blog post, I mean, I have a blog, and if I happen to use, you know, an image on a particular blog post, now it's up on a website somewhere, you better make sure you have some code embedded in that. So again, yeah, you've got to periodically check it. If you have somebody outside, a consultant or a company that's managing your website, designing your website, you want to make sure that your agreement with them has a rep and warranty that the website will comply with WCAG 2.1 level AA, and or an indemnity if something happens, that they will cover you for that. That's critical. And the last thing is, if you sued, or if you get a demand letter, some of the lawyers that do this actually still send demand letters. I'm not really sure why, because, but if you're fortunate enough to actually get a demand letter, it gives you sort of a free chance to fix everything before these legal fees have been incurred, and you can cut off those damages. But you've got to immediately address this. I've seen a number of clients that threw it in the pile, didn't understand it, didn't address it right away, and it allows these lawyers to rack up, you know, the legal fees. I'm sure there are some, you know, true evangelists out there that are bringing these lawsuits because they really want companies to comply and be accessible. I honestly haven't run across them yet. I've only run across the opportunists who are trying to catch people in a gotcha and run up the legal fees. And like I said, it's not going away. So I hope this has been helpful. I just show you a fabulous picture of me that's better than what I look like in real life. You got my contact information. And I think we're going to do questions at the end, or if we don't get to those, I'm happy to talk with anybody offline. So with that, I'll throw it back to you, Miles.
Awesome. That's great. Thanks, Shep. So Anthony, I know you, you know, we've heard about what happens if you do get into legal trouble. But obviously there's some things you can do before it gets to that, right? And I think that's kind of where you come in. Can you tell us a little bit about sort of, you know, what that looks like, how you can do that? I know you've been doing that for some of your clients for quite some time, but also maybe start with sort of how you're connected to this personally. What got you into it? What sort of opened your eyes to this?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that, Miles. Yeah, basically around 10 years ago, I got a call. I'm first of all, IT company. I'm a managed service provider. I got a call from a technician from Tennessee who was completely blind, and he was servicing some clients in my area remotely and needed some help with physical, like going to the site, moving some computers and so on. And I'm like, I was like taken back, like, wait, how is a blind person even accessing a client's computer remotely? How can they see you? And at the time I was at a party where my cousin was there, who's completely blind. He went blind around 15 years ago now. He was a school teacher in the Bronx, and he picked up a mold spore, went into a coma in December, woke up in January completely black, didn't see a thing. So I was talking to him and so on, and I said, do you know anything about accessibility? And he hits me on the side. He says, yeah, what do you think? Of course. So he was explaining to me, how this gentleman worked with a screen reader and so on. From that point on, I was hooked, and I learned everything I could about it. I actually was one of the first to get a CPAC certification from the IAAP, which is an international accessibility group, and went on from there and started help assisting him and doing website analysis, even some design work. But basically, and from my client standpoint, I also went and did a free checkup of all my clients to make sure they are, in compliance, because this is something which I've realized can affect anyone at this point. And from an MSP standpoint, as I have a company, even though I don't deal with their websites and even their apps and so on, which, the laws cover both. The guidelines, you have to make sure you're compliant in both with websites as well as mobile apps. Even software, like we helped Intuit help their, QuickBooks make it accessible. So, I basically told them this mainly because it also allows me to say I did my due diligence to tell them this is a thing. Because I have other MSPs I've heard of being brought in on these lawsuits, even though they don't even deal with the website. It's because they're a technological advisor. They should have brought this to the client's attention. So that's how I got started with this, and been working with it since then. John joined on several years back, and it was also a CPAC certified accessibility expert. Together we've been helping along, helping many large companies and small alike.
So how do you do that? Like what, so someone, we talked about it. It's not just a snapshot in time, right? You have to first kind of recognize, are you in compliance or not? But as Shep pointed out, it takes all of, you could have your marketing person post a picture from a holiday party, and that could be, all your efforts could go out the window, right? So how do you help people and help them prevent that?
Yeah, well, the first thing I tell someone is that they need to make sure that they understand what this is and that they train their front end people, their people answering the phones, the call, any call centers they might have and so on. They need to be trained on this to understand that if somebody calls in, because that's where the legal problems start, is when somebody doesn't understand what's going on and they turn somebody off at the other end. But I tell them immediately, you need to take a look at your website, have your website designer take a look at it from a ADA compliance standpoint. But you need to put an accessibility statement up to show that at least you're taking steps towards making your website compliant. That's number one. You also need to make sure you do some basic manual testing on the site, not just automated. Automated is only like 40% accurate. I mean, you can do that, but if you do it, you have to have somebody that really knows how to read those reports. But manual testing is really the way to go, and that's how we do it. We'll go through a website and look at the user flows, user journeys through the site, and test them out to make sure things are working. And if they aren't, we go ahead and tell them how to fix it. We'll give them examples and so on. The other thing is, once you've now compliant, the site is completely compliant, now you have to do some ongoing checking, because one blog post, like you just said, you put an image up, if you don't tag that image, you're out of compliance. So you need to make sure whoever's doing that work for you is just trained on it. Okay, so if they're trained and they know how to put accessible posts up, and this is even true with Facebook and anything you're posting up, any content, any kind of videos, you need to make sure that they're put up properly. So, and John can go into that a little bit more, but the whole thing is you want to make sure you're working with somebody that knows what they're doing. And the other piece of it too is if you're building a website, it's important to build this in from the beginning. You bake it in because if you have to do it later, like Target did, not only did they get sued, but it cost them $21 million to fix the site because it was so, well established. To go back and fix it, it takes a lot of money. So you're better off, baking it in from the beginning. It costs you hardly anything to do that if you're building a site.
Certainly.
And the other question I got on the to us was, what, are there any exempts? Who's exempt from this? Pretty much all websites, even if they're just content only, not selling anything, you still have to make sure that it's accessible. There's only two, pretty much entities, and that's like private clubs and religious organizations and the entities associated with them. And that's because of the original ADA. Those exemptions carried over.
Gotcha. So you mentioned something I just want to circle back to that was kind of interesting. You said you want to make sure you train your people so they don't get you in trouble. Can you give me an example of what you're referring to?
Absolutely, yeah. A while back, there was a hotel chain that put up a ad for a job placement, and that ad was not accessible. So a person who was blind called that hotel chain and said, look, I'm having a problem accessing the site. It's not accessible. I'm trying to use the screen reader. The person at the other end said, wait a minute, I don't understand. What do you mean screen reader? The guy said, I'm blind. He says, well, we can't hire you. This is, and it's like double whammy. So that's how you start a lawsuit. All right, is that you have to be empathetic, sympathetic with the person at the other end. If that person was trained and said, listen, tell you what, I'll take the application over the phone, but just so you know, we are addressing that issue and it's going to be put over to our web development team immediately. Thanks for bringing that to our attention. Do that, you diffuse the situation. So it's very important from the front end that you have personnel that are trained in this.
Yeah, and I didn't even, until you told me that story, I didn't even think about that as a business owner myself. And obviously something we immediately are sharing with everyone on the team. So they're aware of that because that's again why we're doing this today. I think this is something that's pretty real and pretty serious that's out there and can have some very positive and very negative ramifications if it's not addressed with. But I would say, probably 75% of the business owners I talk to, if not more, haven't heard of this, don't know anything about it, and don't even know it's an issue. So. And then
here's the other piece of this too, is that, there's the legal aspect of it to make sure you're doing this, right? This is the right thing to do. Okay, because it's just a good thing from social capital to do this. The third thing, this is a market. People don't realize that this is like this in this country alone. There's 25 billion people that are visually impaired, 350 million people worldwide. This is a market, all right. And when you count in people with all disabilities, you're over 1 billion people in the world. What is it? 1 out of 5 people have a disability of some sort. 85% of those people have gotten it after they were born. So, people that are aging, macular degeneration, glaucoma, that's why we went with one of our financial clients. We told them that most of their clientele was aging. So it's very important to do the right thing so that they can maintain that clientele. So, it's a market. That's another thing, how we approach it.
Certainly. Certainly. Excellent. Yeah, and I think that's a good, and thanks, Anthony, but I think it's a good segue over to you, John. Obviously, as we talked about, although your last name is probably like Smith elsewhere in the world, it's not a coincidence that you both have the same last name. You are related. You probably, you kind of came from the same story of how you got connected to this. But John, what if you kind of talk a little bit more about that piece? The human side to it and the marketplace.
Sure. Unfortunately for Anthony, yes, we are related. He is my uncle. And we did kind of come into this in the same manner. One of our relatives is blind, and that relative was sort of the jumping off point for both of us into getting into this. So I am a CPAC certified accessibility expert. I'm also a Section 508 trusted tester for the government to do accessibility testing for the government. I've been doing this for several years. While Shepherd is very good with the litigation aspect, and Anthony is good with the market. I'm good with the civil rights aspect of this, and that it's the right thing to do for our society. And for everybody we're trying to market to. We're trying to sell stuff to. We're trying to inform. We want to get to the biggest market base that we can. And a great way of doing that is to make our website accessible, mobile applications as well. And some of the things that people tend to forget is that accessibility in the digital environment benefits all users. It's geared towards all users. And we often talk about blind folks using screen readers. The reason we do that is because the screen reader as a technology, an assistive technology, is the most difficult to code for, to make accessible. So basically, if we meet that level of engagement as far as making a website or a mobile application accessible to a screen reader, then we've covered about 90% of all the issues that are on that website. So that's why we specifically talk about blind, but realistically, accessibility is for all users. A good analogy in the physical world is curb cuts, if we're all familiar, how it slopes down to the ground off of sidewalks. That was initially put in place for users of wheelchairs, so they could easily get onto the sidewalk and into the stores and so forth. But now we look who's using them. Delivery people with hand trucks and dollies, people pushing baby carriages. It seems to improve the world for everybody. There are a lot of collateral benefits, is what I call it. Additionally, Shep touched on the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG for short. That's sort of the benchmark guidelines that we use to measure mobile apps and websites against. And basically, all these are just the guidelines to sort of criteria to build your website to. For instance, images needing alternative text, which describes what's being visually depicted in the image. A proper heading hierarchy so that users who cannot see the page or see the fonts or colors or bolded text, things like that, can get an idea of the organization of the structure of the page. Anthony touched on videos. As we're moving on, obviously YouTube is a giantly popular platform. We have other video platforms as well. Videos are becoming more prevalent on the web and in mobile applications. So we need to ensure that the videos we post have captions for deaf or hard of hearing audiences, have text transcripts for blind or low vision users, or for people who simply prefer to read text versus watch a video, perhaps people with cognitive disabilities. We need to make sure that our websites and mobile applications are usable without a mouse, strictly with the keyboard or a keyboard interface, for instance, for people who have mobility impairments. Maybe they don't have fine motor control in order to use a mouse. Obviously, blind and low vision users can't use a mouse. Blind, certainly, you can't see where the cursor is, so the mouse is totally useless. So a large portion of making a website is to make the all the interactive elements and such usable with a keyboard only. And that's pretty much.
Let me add one thing to that, John. That was excellent. One of the things about this too is that what John was saying, touch upon it, is that making something accessible doesn't mean you're losing the richness of the website or the app. It's still graphically, very robust. The thing about it, though, is you're making it much easier to use, not just for people with disabilities, but for everyone. I mean, personally, I don't like using a mouse. I mean, I'm sighted, however, but I love to tab through a form and do last name, first name, and so on in the right order. And as I'm tapping through it, instead of it jumping me all over the creation, it puts me in the logical order. So it's a benefit. Closed captioning is a perfect example of how that benefit everyone. Is that if you're in a bar and you're looking up at a TV, you can see the closed captioning. You may not be able to hear what's going on, but you can see it. Late at night, if it's you have a lot of kids and they're sleeping, you could watch TV with it muted and still, see what's going on. So there are those side benefits. And the other piece of it, people, make sure you understand is that when you're creating a website and you make it accessible, you've made it now, you have to remember Google's blind. you've now made it accessible to Google. And from an SEO standpoint, you're going to shoot through the roof. All right. So by making it accessible, it's helping you with SEO.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's something I was going to actually bring up is, we found that out a little whiles back as we were doing more video content. You lose so much value, people put so much effort, especially now in the remote world everyone's living in. We're not doing in-person events. We're doing tons of videos and webinars and those kind of things. And you lose so much of the value of those by not going through and having it transcribed so that, all that content becomes text for Google to absorb and read. Right. So yeah, that's a great point. Before we go on any further, we had a couple questions come in, but I think it's good to kind of elaborate on these. I don't know if everyone saw all of them, but the first one was about you already mentioned about, hey, just if the website's just informational, you're not selling anything, does this apply? You mentioned it does. Websites on mobile devices, applications, software, do they get any exclusions? Is it all kind of the same rules?
The only exclusions from a website or app and so on is if you're a religious organization and entities controlled by them, or a private club. And that goes back to the original ADA, all right, back in 73, I think it is.
Yeah, the Rehab Act of 1973. Correct.
Yeah. So because of that, that's where the exemptions come in. But other than that, you could have any kind of website, could be one page, and it has to be accessible. Otherwise, you're opening yourself to possible litigation.
Desktop app, phone app within your website, all has to comply.
Yeah, even like I said, even software like QuickBooks from Intuit, they went ahead and made their software accessible to people with disabilities. Took us working with another company 6 years, but they got it going.
Gotcha. And then, sorry, go ahead, John.
If the website is strictly informational, you also have to think, well, is everybody who wants to receive that information able to? It's not just purchasing things. Mm-hmm. It's being able to receive that information. If only somebody who is sighted can receive that information, then it's not accessible, and it needs to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and again, same holds true with like social media, Facebook, LinkedIn. If you're posting anything up on there, you make sure that that image is described. Facebook does try to do this as best they can. They've been instituting their own, content accessibility.
Description generator.
Yeah, so it's a good, when you're posting something up, describe the image that you're posting in detail the best you can. And again, it just helps everyone, by doing that.
And that's a great point. I didn't even think about that. Oftentimes we encouraging people to drive traffic to all our company-owned social media entities, but all those posts, everything, that's basically going to fall under the same rules and guidelines then, right?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Excellent. And then, and we already talked a little bit about, webinars, videos, everything should be text-based.
Oh yeah. The question here too, if we have an app like within the website, like YouTube, does this help a small entity like ours address the issue of accessibility? If you're using YouTube does auto caption. But beyond that, you also want to look at the video. If there's somebody like a person walking along the beach with a dog, you sometimes you have to put like what they call voiceover over that. All right. The optional of describing that scene that a caption wouldn't necessarily. The other piece of it too, if you have a website and you have third-party add-ins, and I'm going to let John handle this, you are responsible for that. Okay, so yeah, John, take that.
Yeah, anything a author puts on their website is their responsibility, even if it's a third-party plugin, such as an iframe of a YouTube video or any other type of plugin. If it's on your page, you're responsible for it. You should be making sure that anything you put on your page is accessible. And it's not that if you get sued and the issue in question was, say, a YouTube plugin or something like that, it's still on your page, it's on your head.
Excellent. Okay. As far as one other question I got was relative to how can people get started today? Like, what are the first things they should be thinking about doing?
Okay, well, there are several different automated tests you can run. Again, this is something that should be done by somebody who is a little bit knowledgeable about accessibility. But if you're just starting out, you have no clue what to do. The automated tests are pretty good. They're only about 40% accurate, but they will give you kind of a somewhat of an indication of what kind of issues you have on your website, your page. Because most of them are page specific. You test one page at a time, and they'll also give you a little bit of an explanation of what type of issues are present and what you could do to fix them. Some of the things to keep an eye out on, obviously, images we've touched on. If you post an image and it's in any way informative, that image needs to have alternative text embedded in the HTML code so that assistive technology, such as a screen reader, could read what that text is and then speak that text to a user so that they know what's being visually depicted in the image. Videos, such as this one, would need closed captioning or open captioning. The difference is open captioning are present all the time, closed you could turn on and off. A text transcript for people who would prefer just a text-based kind of paragraph of instead of listening and watching the video. That also does help SEO a little bit, as Google can't listen to what we're saying, but if there's a text transcript, it would be able to read it. Things like that. Color contrast is a big issue I run into all the time. Obviously, that'll affect mostly low vision and our aging population, as Anthony, who is a member of our aging population, said. It's a color contrast. You have to make sure that the text has sufficient contrast against this background, so that it's easily seen. Things like that. Use of color as informational things, such as red is stop, green is go. Oh, you should also have the word stop and the word go. Text is the most accessible medium in the digital world, so you're going to want to make sure everything is text-based as well. It has a text alternative. So things like that. Those are the things you can go look at right now. Like I said, heading structure is a big one, so that the users can understand the organizational structure of the page. Link texts, you don't want vague link text such as here or click here or more, things like that. You want to make sure the actual link text themselves are quite descriptive of where the destination is or what they're to be used for. Making sure that your form fields, such as your first name, last name, address, phone number, have proper labels, and making sure the labels are visual permanently. Not that you're using a placeholder text as a label, and then as soon as you start typing in that label is now gone, you don't know what that field is. Obviously, that'll affect people with short-term memory loss, as well as people with visual impairments. So these are all just little things you could check right now. And then I do like to recommend a website called WAVE, WAVE .org. And you can Google it, it'll pop up. And all you do is you put in the URL of a page you want to test, you hit the submit button, and an automated report will generate. And you can kind of check out your own page there and see what issues you're dealing with.
I just put that in the chat, the URL for that, if anybody's interested.
Excellent. That's great. All right, terrific. Yeah, the color contrast thing I can certainly appreciate as I get a little older and start to see how difficult that can be, for sure. Shep, just to kind of swing back to you again, you had a interesting analogy relative to the market and the consumers opening up to other consumers. You had an analogy about someone trying to buy some sporting goods. A little on that, and you sort of how you thought about it versus how others were thinking about it.
Yeah, actually, it ties in with something that Anthony said before. So I think I had written something about this or was informing a bunch of clients. I first found out about this about 2 years ago, where a client of mine forwarded me an email on Friday saying, "Hey, I just got this letter. Can we talk about this Monday morning?" And I said, "Sure." And I looked at it, and it was a demand letter saying the website wasn't compliant under the ADA. I didn't know anything about it. I barely knew what the ADA was, frankly, at that time. Learned about it. We fixed everything, and so I learned a whole lot really fast. And then I started telling my other clients about this, because it was clear to me that if this client got it, other clients were going to get it. And one client, was a major retailer of different kinds of sporting goods. And so I talked to the general counsel and said, hey, you should look into this and make sure your website complies. And the response I got was, well, we don't really sell products to blind people anyway, so I don't really care about this. Which, I mean, I was stunned, that he would have that reaction, on a host of levels, the most ridiculous of which was, why isn't a visually impaired person going to buy this? I mean, even if they're not going to use your equipment, maybe they're buying it as a present for somebody, wholly apart from whether it's the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do, just from a business standpoint. I think Anthony was making that point earlier. It's crazy not to do this because as these guys told you, there's a huge market out there. So, it's good for all these collateral reasons. And, the idea that people don't realize that is amazing to me. It does cost some money to bring the website up to speed. But again, I had one client at one point where they thought they'd fixed everything. It wasn't quite fixed. And I said, well, what's the holdup? They said, well, it's going to cost us $7,000 to do this last fix, whatever it was. And so I said, pay the money and fix it. I said, you're going to spend a lot more on me right away. And even if I can beat this, somebody else is going to sue you the next day, and somebody else is going to sue you the next day after that if you don't fix it. That's why speed in fixing this is critical, because unlike other situations, if a client of mine is sued by Sam Sarwar, as you saw in my PowerPoint, okay, and I can settle that case, somebody else can sue the company tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that, if they don't fix it. You can't get a release that's going to relieve you. Well, I paid this one person, even if there were a class action. You still, the next day, you're continuing to create these violations. So you're always at risk until you bring the website up to speed. Sorry, I went a little beyond your question, Miles.
No, that's okay. No, that was good though. That's good. Again, I don't think the whole purpose of this is, I think, the awareness piece of it, that, this is something that's out there that can have a big impact. And I think most people aren't, as you mentioned, like I said, you were talking about this 2 years ago, and my thought was, oh, well, the big companies are getting targeted, right? That's of course. And now seeing, small to medium businesses getting targeted because, similar to cybercrime, right? The big companies have the defense, the smaller companies don't. And I think they're realizing they'd rather get a bunch of small to medium businesses than go after the big guys now, right? Everybody's fair game. So,
yeah, I mean, I can't emphasize enough, speed in addressing the issue when you get sued is critical. Not just because you're going to cut off the legal fees, but if you have somebody that understands this, that reaches out to the plaintiff's counsel right away, and the plaintiff's counsel realize, okay, this is somebody that understands how this game works, they're going to settle much cheaper and much quicker, because the plaintiff's lawyer doesn't want to fight these cases. They just want to, rack up some legal fees, settle, and move on to the next one. If they see that you're going to be a real pain, then they're like, okay, well, there's still plenty of low-hanging fruit out there. This isn't one of them. I'll just let this one go and move on to the next person. And a lot of that starts with just addressing it right away, right up front. What's it going to take to make this go away? And then you pay less than that.
Actually, that's a great segue to something I wanted to get some clarification on, Anthony. You mentioned, you can have some, even if you're not there, have some text on your website that, talks about, that kind of gives you I don't want to say out of jail card, but helps, as a disclaimer. Can you just tell me a little bit about what you're referring to there?
Yeah, basically an accessibility statement is something that's at the footer of your page that shows that you are at least addressing, there's issues, but you are addressing it. And it's kind of like, it's like having a sign out in front of your house that says you have an alarm. Basically, that a crook is going to go to the next house. But it also means that any drive-by attorneys, whatever, they're going to skip you knowing that you know about this already. And there's a good chance that, they may not, bother you in that case. So it's a good thing to have, but also it can't be an empty statement. You actually have to do things to take steps to fix the site. All right. You can't just throw an accessibility statement up there, but it does show at least you're taking proactive steps. And it does show that you have a contact phone number, an email address, and the person at the other end of that line, if somebody does get, call it, is trained on handling that situation. So that's it's important for you to put something like that up there.
Excellent. That's great. Um, we have a couple more questions actually that's popped in too. One for you, Shep. Does general liability insurance cover any of this? Does it tie into this?
Well, of course, I'll give you the answer we always give, which is I don't know.
Yeah.
Because insurance policies, they say we cover everything, and then they carve away 98% of it with all the exceptions. I think it's very unlikely that you're going to have any coverage for this just under a general policy. And again, I think, if you have somebody that's handling your website, that's the place to get it. But I'm sure you can get some kind of insurance for this. But really, better than the insurance is just fixing it up front and making sure, you set it up, you have somebody that certifies that it's compliant, and again, you test it. That's really better than the insurance. But I really doubt it's in your general liability policy. Unfortunately, you're gonna have to read through, that much stuff in order to figure that out.
Yeah, and I do know from talking to, we work with quite a few insurance companies, and I've talked to them about this, and a lot of times they, insurance space sees, okay, there's an opportunity to insure. There's a new vertical, there's a new space. We've seen it in cyber, right? You used to have one cybersecurity insurance policy, and now there's like 9 different flavors you can get to cover different things, right? And I was asking about this, and they said, yeah, it's kind of a lose-lose for the insurance companies, right? Like, this is not an attractive space for them. They don't want to give you coverage for this. They won't, like you said, they want you just to fix it. It's not like something that happens by accident. There are remediations and ways you can deal with it. And it doesn't look like, from the insurance companies I've talked to, that this is something they really see as an opportunity zone for them. So to your point, Shep, my gut is this is probably one of the things they carve out, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how they could really calculate the risk, which is all they do all day, every day, and figure out, okay, well, this many people will get sued and the premiums will cover that in situations. And they probably would want you to make certain representations that somebody else has certified it's compliant, or you've done certain things. And if you're doing those things, then do you really need the insurance? So.
Absolutely. And then we also got another question about a link to a site with a good accessibility statement. So I guess my thought on that is, John and Anthony, you both posted too. One, basically, the w3.org site. What we'll do is we'll include that when this is done. We'll send a follow-up email to everybody, and we'll include, obviously, we'll include everyone's contact information if people have further questions or concerns about this. But we can also include some of that in there, so people will get that. And when I first heard about it, that was the first thing, Shep and I talked about this, and first thing I did was call my marketing company and say, hey, and luckily he's very much aware of it. He's actually the one that introduced me to Anthony and John. And, he's like, yep, nope, you're all set. It's in there. You're good. We're on the ball on this. So, and again, luckily he was on the ball with this, because I was totally, I guess, no pun intended, I was blind to it, right? It was something I just didn't even know about. So, and I'm sure there's a lot of other business owners out there like that. So as we kind of come to the end of the time here, I just want to see, is there any other things that, Anthony, John, or Shep, that you want to kind of add to this that we haven't covered yet? I think we got through all the questions here.
I just want to stress the civil rights aspect of it, and how this affects human lives. Making the website accessible, it may very well allow a person with a disability to gain independence. A quick anecdote is I worked on a website for a grocery delivery service, and then a few months after we had fixed it up and made sure it was accessible, I got a phone call from a woman who happened to be blind, and she was in tears, and she was telling me that myself and my team who worked on this particular grocery delivery service website, that she is now able to be independent and order groceries for herself. She does not need to bother other people to drive her to the grocery store and ask them, oh, what price is this particular item, or where can I locate this? Now she is totally independent as far as getting her groceries for her daily life. That's the kind of stuff I deal with. I know Shepard is very, very knowledgeable with litigation. Anthony is very knowledgeable with marketing. The human aspect is what I really stress, and it's what I'm most proud of when I work on this stuff. So it does affect flesh and blood people. That's something to remember. That's why we do this.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's a great story and a good, great point too, certainly. Excellent. Okay, great. So, yeah, just to kind of wrap up, I mean, the purpose and what we're really trying to hit here, uh, was about the legal aspect of it, what can happen, what your risks are if you don't pay attention to this right away. Hopefully anyone listening to this, you're going to take action right away if you don't, and at least make sure you're in a good space. But obviously you want to avoid having to, pay off people for frivolous lawsuits, right? So that's number one. Number two, hopefully Anthony gave you a good understanding of the technical impact of it, as well as the search engine optimization factor and the market that you're opening up to sell to. It's a big number, 350 million worldwide, correct, Anthony, if I get that right? Right, so it's a big number there. And then hopefully John also kind of gave you the human side to it. It is the right thing to do. And there's a reason why these things are in place. And at first hand, I kind of thought the same thing, like, oh, this is silly. It's a website. It's not a place of work, so to say, or they're not going into a storefront. But I guess since last March, one thing we've certainly learned is we live a lot of our lives online, for sure. And this is probably going to become more and more serious as we continue to do more and more stuff remote and online. So with that, just wanted to kind of wrap up. Thank you, Shep, Anthony, and John for being online today, going through this. I think it was, we covered a lot of great content. Hopefully people got a lot of valuable information out of it. And hopefully everyone will make sure that they're taking care of themselves and their businesses as soon as possible with this. So with that, thank you, everyone. Take care.